Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the only coast to coast radio show that's all about the information economy. It's time for Inside Analysis. Your host here, Eric Kavanaugh. And folks, we're going to be talking about a pretty hot topic that's on the mind of basically every small to mid sized business in the country right now and probably in the world. We're going to talk about the cloud. So, the exact title is The Jury's Out, to Cloud or Not. So, it's the old Shakespeare, to cloud or not to cloud. Why should you go to the cloud? What are some reasons not to go to the cloud? And with us, we have Brian Demont. He is the CEO and founder of a company called iTex Online out of Dallas. They are a managed service provider, so they provide cloud-based solutions for all kinds of businesses. And we're going to get into the weeds about when to use these kinds of services, what kind of services are they, how do you tackle this, how do you get from on-prem to cloud, what's all this hybrid cloud stuff about, and really into the weeds about what to keep in mind, what the benefits are and what the drawbacks are, and what you should have in your mind as you start talking to managed service providers. So, Brian, welcome to the show. I like your background there. You're rocking in the Dallas Fort Worth area, I can tell. And tell us a bit about iTex Online and where the idea came from.
Sure. iTex, well, thank you for having me on the show, first of all.
Yeah.
iTex is a MSP, cloud hosting provider, and also cybersecurity firm. I started the company in 2002 before the term MSP was even coined. Back then, we
Wow.
were computer repair and IT consultants. Yeah,
That's
so
pretty
a
funny.
lot of evolution in the industry. So we primarily, since we're MSPs at heart, consultants, what we provide is a umbrella of services that any company of any size could come to us and say, we have this challenge, this problem, and we need a strategic IT partner to help us achieve those goals and reach the finish line. Cybersecurity and cloud were two verticals that I developed shortly after starting the company. And because they all three marry each other so well, it's the cross-pollination opportunity there from a business point of view it's astronomical, and it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and so people are familiar with Amazon, they're familiar with Microsoft Azure, you've got Google Cloud Platform. There are lots of other smaller ones and even big ones like Heroku. There are lots and lots of options that companies have. And then there are lots and lots of managed service providers like yourselves for edge computing, for example. There are a lot of sort of mini data centers, popping up all over the place. But you like to focus on small to mid-sized businesses, so basically, that's a lawyer's office, a dentist's office, healthcare providers, any number of small to mid-sized businesses. And if I understand it correctly, you will actually work with the company, figure out what is their technology stack on-prem. Maybe they have 4 servers, 10 servers, something like that. They've got 20 different applications that they're running for running the business, for clickstream analysis, CRM, all that kind of stuff. And you will work with them to port as much or all of that, if necessary, into the cloud, right? Can you kind of walk through what that looks like? Because as I started thinking about it, I'm like, that can be a lot of work to
It
kind of unwind all the
certainly
different
can.
applications and how they connect. Tell us about that process.
Sure. So the first thing is you have to look at, what makes sense to move into the cloud. And so the advantages of going into the cloud, and you don't have to move all of your pieces into the cloud. It's really, in most cases, especially with the company that's 500 staff, with, between 4 and 10 servers, it might make sense to move 75% of the services and data those servers are hosting into the cloud, and then keeping something on-prem just for different use case. But the opportunity for cloud. So first of all, iTex doesn't resell AWS or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud. We have our own tool stack in various data centers across the United States. That allows us the flexibility to help our clients reach their cloud goals on a budget that works for them. And also, we can layer in our own security layers on top of that to provide the adequate type of security for their goals, the compliance needs, and also for their budget. So you can think of our type of cloud approach as a managed service. So a company will come to us and say, look, we have these aging servers that are, well beyond 6-7 years of their lifespan. And instead of me reinvesting between $15,000 and $16,000 per server to modernize that hardware and keep that application or data set going, we really would like to look at, virtualizing it and moving it into a cloud. And because the cost and the economy of cloud has gone down dramatically, if you look at, the last 5-6 years, there's been a big trend on that cost coming down because a lot of competition's been popping up, it just makes sense, right? When you move your server into the cloud, you no longer need to worry about providing power, providing internet, providing security, and providing backup and disaster recovery for that asset. Now that it's in the cloud, that responsibility falls on the cloud provider. And in our case, we're in data centers that have, diesel generators as an example, redundant internet connections. We can tackle in our enterprise grade backup and disaster recovery and our security layers on top of that. So from a cost standpoint, instead of you spending 15,000 to replace and keep hardware good, where your cost of ownership is on you and et cetera, right? Now you might be paying maybe $600 a month to carry the same services and data that server was providing for you, but now it's in the cloud. And then lastly, one other advantage into going to the cloud that just makes sense for any business. COVID was a great example. Whenever your staff can't come into the office, now be it you could have a black swan event where you had a fire, a flood, a vandalism, something happened in your office space where your staff can't come into the office anymore. So if your workforce is having to work from home, it's very hard to provide access into that IT infrastructure if it's all in your office, right? Because again, depending on the situation, it might be cut off. But if it's in the cloud, there's so many different ways of providing access to that data, access to those applications on a secure level, and you can keep your workforce working from home, for whatever needs or time frame, and it's all there and it's accessible.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, just the cloud value proposition is so powerful for so many use cases. I mean, just a personal anecdote here. I have a two-story house. I've got a wife. She has MS, so she's in a wheelchair. I have a child who's now 10. But starting like 5, 6, 7 years ago, I started using Google Cloud for my documents. I'm amazed that they were able to blindside Microsoft in that regard. But the point is, I started keeping all my stuff in the cloud. And that way, I've got a computer downstairs, I got a laptop upstairs, I got another computer in this other room. I could hit any one of those computers and just get to all the documents I have because it's all in the cloud. I could be at a restaurant somewhere, at a cafe, log into the cloud. Here's all my stuff again. To your point, that accessibility to your files, to your processes is just crucial. And it skyrockets productivity for the reasons you mentioned. If someone has to go home and take their kid to the doctor or something, they're not in the office anymore. Now they can't do any work. If someone has to go run some errand or something, all of a sudden they can't do any work. And it's hard to appreciate all of those instances when it's not happening, and then you add it up, you're like, geez, I guess we really did lose a lot of time. And then to your point earlier about owning the technology, then you have to pay for people to manage all that stuff. And that's complicated stuff. If
It
one of your
is.
key applications goes down and your IT guy's on vacation, your business could come to a screeching halt. So there are all of these sort of often unforeseen circumstances that cause tremendous trouble for companies who stay on-prem, and all that stuff gets solved once you're in the cloud, right?
It really does. And the counter argument to cloud that you hear often enough is, well, what happens when your internet goes out your office? Now you're
Right.
cut off from the cloud.
Right, right,
But I mean, who doesn't have a cell phone that has a hotspot on it,
right,
right? So we've really gone over that foreseeable risk, and that's now a thing of the past. There's
right.
really no disadvantages to go into the cloud anymore. And then furthermore, if you're an emergency care clinic or a law office, or you're a publicly traded company and you have these compliance standards you need to meet, it is vastly less costly to hire a company to take care of that security,
Right.
backup, disaster recovery, the data retention, versus you trying to do that yourself.
Right. That's right. Well, I mean, because as a managed service provider, you have a team of experts. They understand the security. Some of them understand disaster recovery and backup. Some of them understand various other issues, networking, various other things. And you have someone who does it for all your clients. So, I mean, it's the same argument that Google and Microsoft make. It may be on a smaller scale, but it's no small scale for the business to not have to worry about these things. I mean, basically, you're offloading a whole array of ops activity that is very complicated. I mean, honestly, in the Dallas Fort Worth area, to hire some director of IT who will understand how to set up all the servers, how to set up all the applications, how to manage all the applications, things like application performance management, APM, that's complicated stuff. You need very expensive software to do it correctly. And point being, you're going to have to pay someone 120, 150, maybe more $1,000 a year to do all that stuff that an MSP is just going to provide out of the box, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's truly amazing. And I see our industry, even with AI coming into play, MSPs are going to be more sought after, more depended on. Just because it doesn't matter. Large companies and enterprise sized companies, they see the value in an MSP because we're specialized expertise, right? So they
Hmm.
have the money, but they may not have the time and the energy or the motivation to create their own security operations center, their own SOC. You know, the average SOC costs somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 million to build yourself. Why do all that and put that overhead and that risk on you when you can just go to an MSP company who has all that done?
Right.
That's their business. And and they provide it for all of their customers. Why not jump on that?
Yeah, well, that's it. And again, I think a lot of companies, even small companies, don't realize how much time and effort it takes. And when you got your IT guy, let's say that person leaves. Now what are you going to do? Now you need
Right.
someone who has documentation of all the apps that you're running. You have to have all your serial numbers for the different applications. And it's like, oh my goodness. Even in the Microsoft stack, they often joke it's death by a thousand cuts, right? Because you have all these different services that you have to apply to, and it starts to add up. The bottom line is that if you can take your core business applications and your data, and let's be honest, the cost of storage these days is nothing compared to what it used to be. I mean, even 5 years ago, storage was a lot more expensive. 20 years ago, it was outrageously more expensive than it is today. So, whatever
Absolutely.
files you've got, I mean, maybe if you are a doctor's office doing MRI scans, those are some pretty big files that you have to store. But still, the storage costs in cloud have just, I mean, obliterated any argument for keeping that stuff on
Yeah,
prem,
we really have
especially when you consider disk failure, fire, damage, someone spilled orange juice on the server or something. I mean, all
to.
these things
Right.
are real events that
Yeah,
have just absolutely calamitous impact on a business, but not if you're in the cloud, right?
that's right. That's right. Yeah, if I may speak on our backup and disaster technology, and this can apply because we provide that as a product even for your on-prem. But imagine we back up your server, whether that's virtualized in our cloud or on-prem at your office. We can restore your files, your folders for you. We can go back in time and do, 2 weeks ago, a month ago, whatever our backup schedule, data retention points are. But then if your server fails, like a hardware critical failure, I can take your backup, convert it into a virtual machine and host it for you. And then
Wow.
you can go to Dell or HP and buy brand new hardware that doesn't even match what you currently had and wait the 2 weeks for that server to arrive. Then my guys can take that backup, that image, right, that virtual machine that you've been still working on, so your company hasn't stopped. Then we
Right.
reconvert that back to physical and we apply it on brand new hardware and you're back up and running. The
Wow.
technology has really come a long way in the decades that stuff has been out.
Well, it's funny, and we'll talk about security too. And in fact, I'll use one of my favorite jokes. My business partner, who I launched this company with, he's based in Austin these days. He's mostly retired, but he's a British gentleman who is one of the best IT analysts in the world. In fact, he kind of launched and began what has become a cottage industry of boutique IT analyst firms focused on enterprise software. 35 years ago, 30 years ago, you didn't need that because there weren't that many major providers. Now there are hundreds, frankly, thousands of software companies, many of them software as a service. They're very complicated. And so you kind of need that service now. So now it's a whole thing. But he's joked about security. He said to me one day, every company has the same man who does security, and his name is Scapegoat. I thought that was pretty dark, but it's true because typically everything's fine in security until it's not. At
Yeah.
which point the security person is typically fired, and they bring in some other person, which doesn't really change anything because you still have the same set of technologies. And I've spent a lot of time understanding and trying to understand the security space. It is so much more complicated now than it was.
I'm
Even
quite proud of businesses though, because when I started iTex in 2002, cybersecurity wasn't even on people's radar. I mean, it was really, if it was at the bottom of their
right,
their discussion for those meetings minutes with, with the C-level suites and the board of directors or whatever. We've, with the increase in ransomware, the trend that now is where we are today, and that's just going to continue to increase, especially with the introduction of AI. Trust me, hackers are leveraging AI to better their attack vectors, to better their chances of infiltrating your systems.
Right.
But what I was saying, what I was alluding to is really you're seeing this new trend now where cybersecurity is commonplace now, a commonplace discussion for most businesses. And it's really been a dramatic, profound change if you were to go back just 10 years ago. I mean, it's pretty cool to see how companies are evolving and truly seeing, okay, we need to prioritize cybersecurity from the offset, not when, okay, now we just got our hands slapped and now we need to put it on priority list. People are starting to be more proactive on it. And that's really cool to see.
Yeah, well, it is good. And one of the things I've learned about security over the years is that it is not just one thing. It is not one application. It's not one protocol. It is a combination of procedures, awareness, training, working with your employees, changing the passwords, all the stuff that we hear about all the time.
Yeah.
And again, if you're doing all that stuff on-prem, okay, that can be done, but it's a whole lot to keep track of. And the more complex your business becomes, the more different types of applications you use, the more complex it's going to get. And let's face it, a lot of the new stuff these days comes as software as a service. So how do you connect that to your on-prem environment? That's so-called hybrid cloud. And
Right.
I've always said on the show, hybrid cloud, it sounds great. It's reality for many companies, but it is also dangerous because there are complexities, there are different handoffs. How do you manage the data going up into the cloud, back down out of the cloud? Really thinking through all those workflows is what you have to do. And I think we'll pick this up in the next segment here because what you want to do when you go in the cloud is not just lift and shift. You don't want to just take the same settings you have on-prem and hand it to your managed service provider. You want to be able to leverage the capacity of the service provider. A lot of that's going to be in the security space for sure, but there are other things as well that we can talk about how you folks help. So don't touch that dial, folks. We'll be right back. We're talking to Brian Demo from iTecs Online. That's ITECS, I believe, online.com, correct?
That's correct.
We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis. Your host here, Eric Kavanaugh, talking to Brian Demo. That's DESMOT, if you want to look him up on LinkedIn. Brian Demo of iTecs Online. They are a managed service provider in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but you serve clients all around the country, especially with your cybersecurity offerings. And we were chatting before the show. Cybersecurity is harder today than it ever has been because let's face it, the bad guys have ideas too, the black hats as they're called, basically these hackers. And it's not, there is this myth that the media continues to propagate of the lone hacker. There's just one guy with his hoodie and he's the one causing all the trouble. It's a whole industry. That's something my partner taught me as well. He said there's an entire industry where you have people who specialize in penetrating environments. They then get inside and they turn around and they sell that access to other people who are good at exploiting these kinds of things, whether for ransomware or for stealing your data, identity theft, all these different things. Someone I was talking to the other day said that the the believed market cap, if you will, of bad actors and the money that they're making by stealing identities and doing all this bad stuff is now in the trillions of dollars
Yeah.
worldwide,
There's
which is
actually hackers for
gobsmacking.
hire companies. So now hackers have their own MSP model where they provide ransomware as a managed service. So you
That's
you hire
crazy.
them, they work with you on designing the best ransomware vector attack. You give them
That's
all the information
terrible.
about your victim that you're trying to get at, and then you can hire them to go after this entity. So think of corporate espionage. It is crazy. It's crazy.
Well, like take the Colonial Pipeline hack. As I recall, what happened is someone got into the user profile of someone who worked at the company, and they were, I guess, hitting his computer at home, where sometimes he would log in, and that's where they got the username and password, which they used to get into the system and then hold this entire operation for ransom. And look, you talk about a massive problem that shut down the delivery of gasoline on the eastern seaboard of the United States.
Yeah.
right? You're like,
Yeah,
geez Louise, because again, non-IT people, and that's, probably 80% of the general public, depending on how deep you want to get, they don't realize how vulnerable so many different systems are. Any system that connects to the internet can be hacked. And the protocols for protecting it against that are changing on a regular basis. The big guns, of course, have a whole bunch of IP that they use in this space, but you folks also have a fairly sophisticated approach to this. Tell us about what you do in the cybersecurity space and what makes you guys different.
sure. Yeah. So we have, as many tools in our toolbox as possible when it comes to that. So when a company comes to us for cybersecurity, if they just need to suffice cybersecurity insurance and us do a vulnerability penetration testing, then fine. That's in our toolbox, which most cybersecurity companies obviously can do. However, for us, we've aligned ourselves with as many partners as possible that have proven technology. So for instance,
Hmm.
Sophos is one of our big partners in this space. We have a product called Optic Cloud where we can install it and look at all of your cloud assets, your SaaS platforms, and
Oh.
give you on the fly monitoring, alerting, compliance templates, to make sure that you're meeting compliance standards. So there's a lot of different cybersecurity tools, and as an MSP, it benefits us and our clients that we are familiar and expert in all of the tools possible that you can find in the industry, so that we can design a cybersecurity package for you that makes sense for your
Hmm.
company, your budget, and your needs.
See, this is very, very interesting. So, to explain to our audience, the cybersecurity space is insane. And what I mean by that is there are thousands of vendors who do all sorts of different things. They do
Absolutely.
monitoring, they do tracing, they do alerts, they do all sorts of different things. And the fact is, in any cloud environment, in any on-prem environment, you have a network. You have a network, you have access points to that network. You've got maybe LDAP or Active Directory or something with all your different people. What was I heard a quote the other day from another expert who is in this space, and he was joking that of all the permissions that are available, he was talking about in the cloud, there's something like 40,000 standard permissions available for Amazon and Microsoft and Google and all these different places. And he said in any given implementation, probably 85 to 95% of those permissions are never even used. So what they do is they come in and they look at your environment and they say, all right, you have all this stuff that's not ever being used. Turn that off. Like turn off all those permissions because you don't even know where they are, let
Yeah.
alone what they do. So let's
Right.
just turn them off for you, right? And I'm
Right.
guessing you do something similar. But what I got excited about is you're mentioning how you got this product that is, I guess, in conjunction with Sophos, and the reason this is important for the average company to understand is that it would take you and your team, even if you have a good IT team, weeks, months, a long time to even understand the array of products and services available out
Right.
there. Whereas a managed service provider, you can have a dedicated team who is all the time looking at this stuff and it updates daily. I mean, these days, updates on different platforms are happening all the time. You cannot keep pace with that stuff.
Right.
So, what you bring to the table is this capacity not just to do your basic security stuff, but to have these additional tools that look for like multi-cloud visibility, looking for security gaps, for example, optimizing cloud costs for crying out loud.
Yeah.
That was the one of the funniest quotes I heard a few years ago is the most ungoverned line in your IT budget was the AWS bill, right? Because
Yeah.
one day you just like flip on your screen, and you go, oh, where did all that money come from? Someone left a query running over the weekend or something, right? So all these different things, an MSP can help you by showing you what is available and giving you access to much greater technology than you could afford yourself, right?
Right, yeah. And a responsible MSP, we don't stick with our partners and just get, stagnant and kind of just go on the usual as, business as usual. A responsible MSP like iTex, we really go in and we're constantly looking at emerging technologies, what our partners are doing, what they're not doing, and we switch. So just because we're partnered
Mm.
with Sophos on one product today doesn't mean that we switch over to Checkpoint or Cisco or Palo Alto as an example. So as an MSP, we're providing expert consulting services at the same time, right? So we help you figure out which tool maximizes your ROI in the vast ocean of options and technology and solutions that you could just Google and just find yourself.
Right. Well, a point being, in any particular space of the security landscape, there are going to be scores, in some case, hundreds of vendors who have a different approach. They all have a slightly different kernel, they have a slightly different methodology, but understanding the differences between those and then knowing who is best of breed and who's not. Maybe a company doesn't need that much security, so you can use a lesser cost solution for them. The point is, you can facilitate that whole process of understanding what does this client really need? How can we bring together the right bits and pieces, the right tools to leverage on their behalf to get them viable and get them running in the cloud and get them safe and secure, right? And it depends, I'm sure, on from one client to another, whether, financial services, healthcare has HIPAA regulations. So just knowing those things is tremendously helpful to educate the client about what they have and what they need to have. I mean, just the compliance check boxes that you have to worry about. That's another job that would be a full-time person to do stuff that you guys can do in probably a tenth to a 20th of the time, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Let's talk about this cloud cost optimization. Is that something you guys also do where you can work with clients to look, you have these 9 different software as a service solutions, you maybe are in 3 different clouds. You can take a hard look at that and say, maybe you should move this from here to there, keep this on-prem. And that's the kind of consultative work you do, right? Talk about that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And there's a big mistake that people make when they go into the cloud is they think that, okay, we need to allocate all of these resources off the get-go, because we want to make sure that our productivity doesn't go down, that we don't have any lag, as an example. But truly, the cloud is so advantageous versus on-prem because you don't need to build out your server for future growth, right? I can sell you a virtual server with the bare minimum specs of CPU, memory, storage. All of that is elastic. So when you get into it, right, it scales with your business model. So when we look at companies that are in AWS or Google Cloud or wherever, we start looking at how much of that technology, how much of that rented resources are they truly using on a weekly basis. If we see no spikes, if they never hit a ceiling, then there's an opportunity there to draw back a little bit of those resources and save on cost. And sometimes those costs can be, can add up, a lot. And then also looking at, again, back to the cybersecurity tools, we're very well aware of the service offerings from these different cloud providers. And so, if we see a client is in AWS and Microsoft has the same product, but at a 30% discounted cost, for whatever reason, we'll certainly bring that to their attention and let them make the decision if it's worth their time going in and switching over to that new provider.
Yeah, and you reminded me of something that you were talking about before the show, in that your approach to serving clients is different from a major cloud provider. So with Amazon, with Google, with Microsoft, you get yourself an account and you have a login basically where you can kind of surf around and find different services, database services, analytics services, whatever the case may be, and you're responsible for sort of cobbling that all together. And granted, even though it's easier in the cloud than it is on-prem to do those sorts of things, it is still a pretty complicated process of stitching together the different components, knowing how to get all that stuff working. With you folks, you have a dedicated team, is that right? So anyone who comes to you, let's say a lawyer's office or a doctor's office or something, they're going to get a dedicated team who know that account and that client and that technology stack. And those are the folks that the client will work with on an ongoing basis, right?
That's right. So, we don't have the help desk model. We have the pod model is what I called it. And what that means is you come on board on cloud, cybersecurity, or MSP verticals, you're going to get a dedicated pod, a group of people that know you by your first name, you know them by your first name, their first name, and they know your business model, they know your policies, your culture. So when a company comes to us for our cloud products, we have a control panel-less approach. We don't have a login where you can start spinning up virtual assets and allocating resources like AWS. With those models, you're responsible for understanding what you're turning on, paying for that on the pay-as-you-go model, and also securing it, right? So it's not just you go to AWS and you spin up a virtual machine and you're good to go. No, that's not true. If you open it up to the internet so that your users can terminal server in and use it as a virtual desktop, it's on you as an AWS customer to secure that yourself. You have to understand their infrastructure and their technology, that control panel, to do that. So for us, companies come to us and say, we have this need, but we don't know how to achieve it. We don't know how to migrate our data into it, help us understand what we should get, how to accomplish that, how much time it's going to take, and help us secure it. And so we provide all of that as a managed service.
Hmm. Yeah, that's very good news because again, all of these IT oriented tasks become onerous if you don't have experts who know how to do them. And as I keep suggesting, the landscape keeps changing and the trajectory is clearly toward the cloud, right? I think that the rumors of on-prem's demise have been greatly exaggerated. I think for many large companies, there's going to be an on-prem data center for many, many years to come, if for no other reason than amortizing the costs or just PII. There are a handful of things that are better left on-prem, but by and large, it's moving to the cloud. So you want someone who understands that, and we get back to this concept of having a team at a managed service provider who knows what these different cloud providers offer, and so they'll know, hey, and like I say, these updates are daily. So you could have a promotion from Microsoft where they're offering some new application that Google provides, but like you say, half the cost. Knowing that is half the battle. Being able to do the transfer is the other half of the battle. But that's where an MSP comes in handy, right? To just alert you when it's an opportunity and then to actually help you move that
Execute.
stuff around, right?
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, this is good stuff. Let's get into some of the other use cases. We got another segment coming up here in a moment, but you mentioned that you used to be fix your computer type folks, consultants. When did you see that shifting? Was that like 10 years ago? Was it 15 years ago? When did you notice that the world had changed and you were a different kind of entity?
It was around 2005. Really, if you remember, the news media, when they heard of the term the cloud, right,
Mm,
referring to the internet, because that's all the cloud is the
right.
internet. In essence, they took off with that, and that was around 2005. So I saw a big shift in how, you know, with the evolution of Google, that helped a lot. Where yellow pages really became void and null at that point, right?
Right.
Paper media. So I think 2005 was around the time that I could say exponentially things started drastically changing. That's also around the time, I'd have to Google it to know exactly when, but when Microsoft released Office 65, email hosting in the
Right.
cloud. Prior to that, everybody had an Exchange server on-prem,
Right.
or they were hiring some small, web hosting company to provide POP and
Right.
SMTP services,
That's right.
and then and so if you wanted that synchronized technology where one computer and another computer shared the same email in your inbox, that's Exchange services. That was only accomplished with the Exchange server that was an on-prem solution until Microsoft came out with Office 365 to put that in the cloud.
Yeah, that's right. Amazing how much things have changed. 2005, it doesn't seem long ago. It's actually 19 years ago. This
Yeah.
time flies when you're having fun. Well, folks, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, talking to Brian Dimon from iTex Online. That's ITECS online.com. They're based in the Dallas Fort Worth area, but they have data centers around the country. And we're talking all about the move to the cloud. When do you move to the cloud? When do you not move to the cloud? I will tell you, Brian, I thought for sure that there would be a massive movement to the cloud. You mentioned '05 timeframe. I thought like around 2010, it was all going to happen. And I run an IT analyst firm, but also kind of a media firm. So we do a lot of email marketing. And I can tell by which stories get clicks what's interesting to the audience. And cloud was just a snoozer all through the 2010s, like 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I'm like, what is going on here? Why is nothing moving to the cloud, or at least not much? And it was really, I credit Satya Nadella of Microsoft for pivoting that entire massive organization to focus on cloud. And when that happened, I think there were, I'm talking tens, if not hundreds of thousands of business people who were like, huh, wow. You mentioned Microsoft 365. I think that was a major, major inflection point in IT management, in application design and development, and all the software as a service stuff really started to take off. Even though it was around in the 90s and the aughts, it was really like in the mid 20 teens that everything took off. And now, of course, it's cloud first, and everyone's talking about cloud. And you don't want everything in the cloud. But cloud first seems to be the mentality. Well, I mention all this because when I look at companies that have been around, especially for 30 years, let's say, or even 35, 40 years, you're going to have this ancient stack of legacy systems, right? And one funny joke I heard from a guy, we were trying to define a legacy system, like what's the definition of a legacy system? He said, any system that's in production. I thought that was funny. I'm like, all right, that's you're good. Really, there's a more nuanced definition, which is a system in production which is old enough that not many people understand it. You got mainframes still out there, but let alone mainframes, old servers that are running business applications, of which there are gajillions of them. They're all over the place. And so when you focus on SMB, you have to have the chops to be able to go into these environments, understand the array of technologies that they're using, and then map out a roadmap to get them all into the cloud. Can you kind of talk about that and talk about what it takes and maybe some of the interesting things that you've seen going into some of these environments? And I guess you said the longest it's ever taken you is a month. I think that's amazing. And the average is like a week. And sometimes it can be in a day, which is, I think, really amazing. But talk about that process of going in and having consultants who are experienced enough to know which questions to ask and where to look.
Yeah, so from the onset of the introductory call with our clients that want to move into the cloud and really understand the value of it, the first thing we do is we assign, the technical expertise that conducts the deep dive call and just walks them through and holds their hand throughout the entire process. Think of it like a super technical account executive. So there's no cookie cutter answer to any company when they ask, what is it going to cost and how long is
Right.
it going to take for me to get in the
Right.
cloud? We never give them any speculation because we don't want to
Yeah.
give them any false promises or false hopes. So what we do first is we do that deep dive. We first get in and we understand, what servers do they have, what applications, and their data set, because there's a big difference between a company that has just 500 gigs of data that they're servicing through a file server to their employees versus one that's 16 terabytes, right? A law firm that has TrialWorks installed on their application server on-prem and all their case files assigned to it, that's a big deal. And it's very difficult to move that into the cloud. And that's one use case for now for a law firm where they're almost stuck staying on-prem because TrialWorks and its limitations with that software. So again, it's really understanding what they're using, how they're using it, and their policies and their compliance requirements as well.
Right.
So once we thoroughly understand that, we never just say to a customer, you can go 100% cloud. We always reserve that statement after the fact of what we know, what they have and how they're using it first.
Yeah, and just the compliance stuff. I mean, regulations are changing all the time. I heard the other day that there are something like 33 or 34 states that have either passed some sort of regulation around data privacy or in the process of passing regulation. I mean, all that, like state by state, it's different, which of course makes life very challenging for anyone who covers multiple states because you have to know the particular state. What are their policies? What are these policies? Being able to map all that out and then align it with the technologies in place and all the data that's in place. I mean, there are lots of things you could do. There's data masking, there's data encryption, encryption at rest, encryption in motion, I mean, all these different things you could do. But the point is, you need to have a plan, and that plan has to be in compliance if you are a financial service provider or healthcare provider. Those regulations are intense. They're, I think, in some cases they're ridiculous, but it's just my personal opinion. But you have to be able to meaningfully address all of those. And that, again, is something where an MSP who has a specialty in this space can knock that stuff out in hours instead of days or weeks. And then you can sleep well at night and you have someone who is by your side helping you do that. Because otherwise, it's going to chew up your entire day. If you're a small company, it'll chew up your entire day just trying to stay on top of what's changing, right?
Yeah, I think as a customer, potential cloud customer, when you go to an MSP company, especially, one of the red flags you would want to look for when you're engaging with them is how quickly are they trying to sell you any kind of product, right?
Mm,
Because if they don't
that's
understand
good.
what you're trying to accomplish and the nuances behind that, then they're just trying to just bang as much money out of you as possible, right? And so reputationally, that's not lasting and it's not sustainable. So when you find an MSP that truly invests their time and energy in understanding your business, your model, your needs and your budget, then you can at least suspect you're in good hands. And then it's about the execution. Are they following through with their timelines, their projected, RTOs and so forth? So then you look at the other variables, other factors.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. And it's funny, I have not heard that comment before, and I talk to people all the time. But it's brilliant because what you're saying is if someone's trying to move too fast, it's like, oh, too fast for love, man. Hold on. Like, why are you trying to sell me this product? You don't even know that much about my business yet. It's going to take time talking to the client to understand what are their needs, what applications are you running, what are the SLAs, service level agreements that you're going to need, all these kinds of things. That stuff takes a little bit of time because every business is unique. Even companies in the same space, even dentists' offices, for example, it depends. How big is your clientele? What do you charge? What are the actual applications that you're using? All of these things come in, and it's a very unwieldy set of components to build into a picture, but that's something that a good consultant can do because they understand the interdependencies. They understand, how important it is for this application to have very snappy response time, right? I mean, how many times have you been on the phone with customer service or at a store and they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, our system is running slow today." It's like, well, what is that? Is that the cloud? Is that your database? Is that,
Right.
the network? What is it? It's always something. There's something going on, but only to the trained eye can good answers come out, right?
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah,
Yeah, this is that's a very I'm going to remember this one. I'm going to steal that just so you know. If
no
I
problem. Thank you.
if I choose to get into the cloud provisioning world, which I will not do, I can tell you right now. I know the headaches, man. I mean, I've talked to some pretty smart people too. In fact, Ali Ghodsi, the CEO of Databricks, which is one of the darlings in Wall Street these days, I asked him on an analyst call one time, I said, "Are you going to go build your own cloud?" And he kind of laughed. He said, "That was the original idea. But now that we know, no way. Like, we don't want to do that at all. I mean, there are things you have to understand about like where in the room you put the server, what temperature it should be at, how you should set up the electrical, because just the power consumption for some of these things is just so massive. I mean, who was telling me that around the DC area, as you fly overhead into Washington, DC, if you look down, you'll see all these new buildings, and half of them are data centers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
It's like this.
I think if you fast forward just 5 years from now, we're going to see a lot of applications that you can buy. Like, QuickBooks is not an example I'd like to say now. I think that QuickBooks will go to QuickBooks Online only and provide purely a SaaS platform.
Right,
It'll be a little while before they eliminate or sunset their desktop, application. But we've already seen that trend where a lot of applications previously that you had the option to install locally and host locally on your desktop are now just all SaaS. And that push is just even more so going to exponentially continue in that trend. And I think 5 to 10 years from now, we're going to see a majority of everything just runs off the cloud. All of your platforms, your cars communicating. Tesla is a good example of that with their SaaS platform that communicates with their car and constantly updating data that's getting
right.
from their sensors. So it's pretty cool. And I'll tell you one quick thing I learned from another MSP owner. If AWS, when you sign up with AWS, well, maybe I'll save that for a later time, but it's a cool story about how much data they would actually, how many planet Earths they would have to have in order to provide the full data footprint that they've already sold.
I'll tell you what, let's do that in the podcast bonus segment that's coming up next. Folks, if you want to be on the show, send me an email, info@insideanalysis.com. Would love to get you on the show to talk about the information economy. Don't touch that dial. Podcast bonus segment is coming up next. All right, folks, welcome back to Inside Analysis podcast bonus segment starting now with Brian Demot. That's Desmot, French name, from iTex Online. They're based out of Dallas Fort Worth, but they service companies all over around the country. But Brian, you had a fun story about what it would take. Tell us the story that you were just going to talk about.
Yeah. So Amazon, their storage is elastic, right? Like all cloud should be. And so you can buy, a company can say, I need to reserve 1 terabyte or terabyte or whatever you want to call it of space, but they're only using, maybe 10% of that at the time. So Amazon says, oh yeah, sure, you can have that much space, no problem. So if Amazon had to provide all of the promised space that companies are reserving all at once, it would take more than one full planet Earth to provide that demand or that pre-sold amount of storage space
That's crazy.
that they have on their books.
Is that like overbooking flights? The way the
Yeah, right.
the
Yeah.
flights, like, oh well, this flight is overbooked. Sorry, we can legally do that. Who
Stand by.
wants to who wants to raise their hand and not fly today? Who wants to not store their data in the cloud? You
Yeah.
know, can I tell you? I'll tell you an embarrassing story. Not really embarrassing, but it was like 1997, I want to say, and I was wrapping my head around the cloud. And I was like, there'd be an awesome service where if you give me all your photographs, like special things you want to keep, we'll publish them in the cloud. We'll charge you $30, but we'll keep it forever because I know the costs are going to go down. Wouldn't that be a great service? And then, of course, Facebook shows up and like, oh, yeah, I guess they covered that one,
They sure did.
right? Well, and then you look at, and speaking of Facebook, I mean, I'd just be curious to get your thoughts on this Llama 2, their new giant AI engine, which they've open sourced, right? So ChatGPT, it was open AI. It's not, they should have changed the name. It's not open anymore. It's a black
Nope.
box now. You got Gemini, you've got Claude with Anthropic, you've got, I'm mentioning uh,
Elon Musk,
with Grok,
his is open source as well. Yeah.
right? With Grok. And I tell you, like, talk about the future. I gave a talk in New York on the 10th of this month on the death of journalism. And what I was talking about is that a lot of what masquerades as journalism these days is really just opinions that people have, is certainly in the political space. And what business people want is just information. I want to know what's selling where for how much money, what are the trends, what are people buying, what are the things like, how can I improve my business, right? So all I want is facts. I want information in context that I can use to improve my business. Well, in my talk, I said that the future of journalism is going to be largely curated by humans, but generated by AI attached to systems of record. So think sales tax systems, think the Federal Register for the government, things of this nature. Well, I say that's the future. The next day, I went on Twitter, and it may have been there a few days earlier, but I noticed something that the headlines, when you click on a headline, you get a little abstract, which is like 120 words or something. And beneath it, it says, oh, this story is generated dynamically by tweets on the platform. Grok makes mistakes. Please check. I'm like, oh, that's it. That's exactly what I was talking about.
Yeah.
So here you have these AI models, which are crazy. I mean, one of my other clients is the Institute for Experiential AI out of Northeastern, and the guy who runs it, Usama Fayyad, very very smart guy. I booked him for a keynote in 2001. That's how long I've known this guy in Chicago. He says to me, he goes, "These models now, they're too big. They're not supposed to work. Nobody knows why they work." I'm like, what? This guy runs the institute. He's coming out and saying, like, we don't even know how the hell this
That's
stuff works.
kind of a scary thought, actually.
Well, it is. It's
Yeah.
crazy, right? But the amazing thing is that they do work, right? I mean, they work and they reflect
Absolutely.
back all this language. And what's interesting is that everyone's excited about the text generative and image generative capacities, and that is very interesting. What I find much more interesting is the pattern recognition capabilities, like in vector databases, these similarity searches that you're doing. The fact that you can give it this detailed prompt and get all this text sent back to you that's in oftentimes picture perfect prose.
Right.
That's like holy Christmas. And I think it's really just another straw in the wind, right? That we have to pay attention and start using these technologies. I mean, there are companies saying, oh, no, 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 don't even use that stuff. I think that's crazy. What are your parting thoughts on all this Gen AI stuff and what companies should do about it?
Yeah, I think using it to an extent is good. We use it internally for many different things. I do think but our VP of sales and marketing doesn't like using AI to create blog articles, for example, because as you get familiar with AI written articles, you can kind of see what's AI written and what's
Right,
not. And
right.
to not be disingenuous, to stay true to our market and our expertise, it's so easy for me to go to ChatGPT and tell it me to write a 500-word article on a certain topic. But if I put in my time and my energy, my blood and sweat into an article that comes directly from here instead of AI, that's going to come to the surface, right? So
Right.
there's always opportunities to stay human, and then there's obviously to maximize productivity and efficiency to use AI. So it's an on use by use case for sure.
Yeah, I think so too. And some of the best advice I've heard is what you just told me, that you use it internally. So use the stuff internally first, folks. Play around with it, get
Yeah.
used to it. It's like a set of skis with jet propulsion on them, right? I mean, it can do amazing things, but just don't go down the slope the first time, like the
Right.
moguls with your jet-powered skis, because you're gonna wind up in a tree somewhere, and that's not too fun. Well, just 1 minute left. Any parting thoughts from you about iTex Online or the cloud?
No, no. Again, I want to thank you for having me on the show, and I would like to invite anybody to call us. If you even think about maybe in the future an MSP might fit your business model, your IT needs, give us a call. We can give you a free consultation, get you familiar with our service offerings and how we might be able to help your business.
That sounds good. Look them up online, folks. Brian Demont, DESMOT, iTex Online, ITECS Online.com. This wraps up for us here. And like I said, folks, if you want to be in the show, send me an email, info@insideanalysis.com. We'll talk to you next time. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.